This is an interview I recorded quite a while ago with a man who goes by the name Sissy Joyce. Sissy Joyce is a sissy, which means he is a man with a fetish for masochism or submission. And as part of that, he dresses up as a woman, or it's fairer to say he dresses up like a maybe anime little girl. It's a sexual fetish. Sissy Joyce also claims to be a woman on the inside. He came across my radar because I got the algorithm on Facebook gave me an ad for his shop. He runs a sissy shop in a little town in the north of Belgium, near the border with the Netherlands. And the sissy shop sells all kinds of things like costumes, cages for one's penis, all sorts of toys for this particular sexual fetish. And I was shown an ad for his shop, I presume, because I have a sock account on Facebook that I use to lurk in in the groups where these men gather, purely for research purposes. So I was interested in talking to him because he really does seem to think he is some kind of a woman. And while I always suspected these men have a kind of a fetish, like a submission, humiliation, kink fetish, he just comes right out and says it. And what surprised me about him when I came across him was that he didn't make any effort to hide the connection between the fact that he wants to be seen as a woman and he wants to be seen as submissive. And my theory is, if anyone follows me on Twitter and follows my writing, knows that these men often see women as the lowest of the low, sort of type of most humiliating role that you can possibly take on. And so that's where this compulsion comes from, is to be weak and submissive is to be a woman. So I find that really insulting. I think a lot of women do. And it's why we are so against gender identity ideology, because we sort of sense that. With this interview, I had the opportunity to sort of weed that out. The classic role is a sissy maid, a maid being a cleaner, I think indicates that these men who want to be seen in this role, it's the evidence that it is about the lowliest role that you can think of, because what's more lowly than a maid, a cleaner, someone who has to clean up after everybody else. So the combination of being female and a female cleaner, there is nothing lower. This is a really common fetish among men who claim to be women. A lot of men start out their journey as role-playing in these masochistic roles, like sometimes schoolgirls, but often it will be a maid. Sissy maid is a very common one, and it's been around for like a long time. In Sissy Joyce's shop, the outfits that you can buy for your role play are little girl's pajamas, schoolgirl, nurse, maid, obviously, and also cheerleader. The cheerleader one is sort of like entertainment, and it's, I suppose, the associations with cheerleader is like airheads. Also, it's not very, I guess, edifying role. It's sort of attractive and kind of stupid woman bouncing around. This is kind of how they want to be seen as part of their fetish. So it was an interesting conversation. He got quite angry at me afterwards because I went straight back to Twitter and then started, like, he didn't say anything to disabuse me of the opinion that these men have a submission fetish and that the humiliation kink, the strong association with wanting to be humiliated, is not unrelated to their desire to be considered women for all purposes. He didn't say anything that made me think the opposite of that. I spoke to a couple of sexologists around the time that I did this interview, and I came away stronger, in my opinion, afterwards. So that's it. You can make your own mind up. It was a very long conversation. Afterwards, I went back on Twitter. I said a few things. He got really angry at me. I think he thought he might be able to persuade me to come around to his ideas about himself, which didn't actually work. He really, really would like to be a woman. And there was no way in the world that this conversation was going to result in me agreeing that he is. And this is a thing that is very common with autogynephilic men, fetishistic transvestites, whatever you want to call these men. It would be a very big win for these men, especially to get somebody very critical like me to say, okay, you know what? This is all bullshit, but for you, I'll make an exception. Or I don't really believe in this stuff, but I can see that with you in particular, you get a pass, because lots of TERFs have different ideas about what motivates these men. And from my experience, what motivates these men is an absolute, like, existential, distressing, dire need, craving to be actually a woman. That's what they want. they'll do anything to get it. And that's why, even when these men get their genitals removed, and even after their wife has left them and they've spent so much money and they have a lot of go through pain and everyone looks at them weird, it doesn't turn out the way they want it. I've seen this in my extensive research. It doesn't turn out like they don't end up happier than they were before. But they don't really either see another alternative, because the alternative was to keep living in that, not expressing this weird woman feeling that they claim to have. Basically, it's an option between keeping it in and letting it all out. Letting it all out has some perks here and there, and especially now in this atmosphere, in this environment where they get everything handed to them that they want. But keeping it in had no perks. So I think that's how these men see it when it comes down to it. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. And if you do, please go to my Substack if you haven't already and subscribe to my newsletter, or you can take out a paid subscription. Welcome to the Peaked podcast, where I talk about gender identity ideology and other bad ideas, women's rights and free speech from a European point of view. All right.
First of all, thank you for doing this and to actually go in conversation with somebody and that has a different perspective of you. So that's really good. And I hope we can learn a bit about both perspective. That's the main thing about and where we can start. Do you have any questions you want to start with, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to tell your viewers, my listeners. First of all, I'll just say why I have my video not on. It's because I am a target of activists wherever I go. And so the fewer people know what I look like, the better. So that's the reason. But I thought it would be good to start off by explaining how you came across me and how I came across you, because I think that's interesting and it tells a bit of the story.
Of course. Yeah, go for it.
So how did you come across my name?
Well, if I'm completely honest, I think I don't really remember exactly, but I remember seeing like a post I disagreed with. And I just thought I would message you and go in conversation with you, maybe. Yeah.
Do you remember what the message was? Was it something quite specific or was it just general quote unquote transphobia?
I think so. I think it was more the last. Yeah, I don't remember specifically. I'm so sorry.
No, I don't remember either, but I'm wondering if there was something that was sort of like specific to you and your life that was, because I generally post all the time things that you would consider transphobic, but it goes from sports to fetishes to prisons, women in prisons, everything. So I was wondering if there was something in particular, but you wrote to me in a DM and your DM said, I find you very hateful. I wonder why you're like that, or do you want to come on my show or something? And I wrote, do you remember what I responded?
Well, I actually got the conversation here. I'm scrolling through it right now. Well, you said you were going to check it out and that you were interested in having a conversation like this. So,
do you remember that I told you that you find what I say hateful, but that I find what you say and do also hateful? Do you remember that?
Yeah, a little bit for the live stream. That's why I didn't go.
But we're live now, yeah? And you're recording and everything. Okay. So we can get into it. And did you understand at all what I meant when I said that I find what you do hateful? I would love to understand how you view the whole thing.
I think it's a bit hard to explain because English is not my main language, but I think people with your perspective have a little bit of a wrong view. You guys are more influenced about the bad things that you see on the internet and create your perspective and your opinions based on what you see on the internet.
So it is, that's sort of the argument of like, if you knew more trans people, you wouldn't be like this, sort of, because I've heard that quite a bit.
Maybe perhaps that, but I would more say if you wouldn't consume so much hateful content, that your opinion might be different.
And when you say hateful content, could you give me an example, let's say, of the type of thing?
For example, I won't give a specific example for you about your content, but what I want to say is, for example, in Belgium, we have a far-right party, Vlaams Belang. It's a far-right party who don't like people with a different skin color. So what they do, they post videos of like a bad person with a different skin color beating up a white person. black guy sitting up a white guy, and they post it on Facebook or social media, and they say, "Look, everybody like that is evil. We should get rid of them." And that just creates a wrong perspective of reality, because I can make videos of two white guys beating each other up too, but we don't do that, and that creates like a wrong image of an entire group of people. I truly believe there are evil trans people and there are bad trans people. But there are also bad. There are.
So what? So if I understand correctly, you're saying that because some trans-identifying males, I'm just going to call trans-identifying males, because some, which for anyone listening who's new to this topic, these are males who identify as women, because it's a bit confusing, the terminology, because to say trans women, often people don't really know what we mean by that. A lot of normies think trans woman means a woman who's butch and taking testosterone or whatever, but actually by trans woman, what we mean is a male who identifies as a woman. So what you're saying is, if I understand, and that's very insightful for me to know, you're looking at from the point of view where, like, if, there's bad eggs among every group. So you're saying that if we pick out the trans-identifying guy who does something bad while presenting as a woman, that's not indicative of, okay. And when you mentioned Vlaamsbelang, well, also for those who don't know what that is, Vlaamsbelang is basically like the Brothers of Italy or Marine Le Pen or who else, like these sort of these right-wing parties that are quite anti-immigration, and they also have these like horrible fascist backgrounds. Always, when you dig into it, you always find some link to like nasty stuff in their past. Are you also saying, because I hear this as well, that for example with Trump, that people think that politicians are creating these controversies and riling people up and making people take things? Okay.
Yeah, I 100% believe that. And here is why. I don't think transgender people are the problems of any big problem in the world. They're not the cause of any big problem in the world. We are a very minority group who's afraid to go outside. A half year ago, I was afraid to death to wear. I was so scared to wear a dress outside in public because I don't want to bother anyone. Like, we're a very minor group, and we're not a problem. Well, surely there are a few, but like the main problems like poverty and all that stuff and wealth distribution, that has nothing to do with trans people. And the rich just want the normal people to focus on that, on like stupid, like fight between each other. So you're not looking at the rich people who are actually the cause of all the problems.
It's interesting because here, so you've listed about, I think, 4 things there, and they're kind of the same 4 things that I hear, not on Twitter, because on Twitter it's like it's a savage shit show on Twitter, and it's just, but whenever I go outside the Twitter bubble and I try to have if you end up having this discussion but on the internet, people in person don't really talk about it because it's so controversial, but these are the arguments that we come up against all the time. So the first one, as we said, was politicians riling up people. Second of all, plucking like the bad apples out of a big group. And it's not representative. And then the other one was, what was you doing? Oh yeah, the rich trying to sow division so that we'll focus on that. And then what was the other one? Oh yeah, and that we're all such a small, tiny percentage of people. And so
you're better at rephrasing it than me.
Well, no, but you're doing really well. Thanks a lot for speaking in English, by the way, because I watched some of your videos, not the dirty ones, but I watched some of your interviews and I noticed that you're making a great effort to speak English. So thanks a lot. So we don't know each other very well. And it's unfortunate for me that it's live, because I was hoping that I could like show you my face and we could chat a little bit beforehand, because I sort of feel like that we've been chatting for a while now through DMs, and I feel like we have an understanding with each other. And you've maybe not decided yet whether I'm a monster or not, but I would like to ask you, based on what you know about me, and maybe, I don't know if you read any of the things that I sent you because it's quite long. I do very long reads, but do you think that my opinion on the trans situation generally is because I was influenced by perhaps Vlaamsbelang or Trump, or that I'm cherry picking bad examples only, and all the other reasons that you listed? Or do you think there's anything else that women might object to?
I think what you post, like there are things, what you do basically is you I need to think about how I phrase this in English.
Take your time. No stress.
So I think what you post are legitimate things that are not okay. Like men, if there would be men who would go to a women's sport or a boxing sport and they beat up a girl, that's not okay, of course. But or like a guy who goes into a women's toilet, that's also not okay, of course. But sharing those handpicked idiots or bad people and putting them all under the transgender category and saying like, hey, here is a bad person or here's somebody who does something bad or evil and making it look like that's all of us, that can be frustrating and not true.
But so then to clarify, you don't think that male-born people should be allowed in women's sports, or what's your position on that?
I do think so. I can kind of understand that. Like, I don't think if somebody is born as a guy, like myself, and I would have an advantage in sports over a biological female, I don't think I should be able to compete with them. So I totally understand that. But I watched some of the debates and I lost a lot of muscle mass, by the way, since I transitioned. And I think I'm weaker. Well, I am weaker than, for example, my ex-girlfriend. So you lose a lot of muscle mass, and I can kind of understand that there's more than just gender when it comes to making a sport equally fair. There's more than just what's between your legs. Because, for example, if you have two guys, if you have a guy that's skinny built and just doesn't have the genetics like Mike Tyson does, he will never, regardless of how hard they train, he will never win from some pro boxer because of their genetics. So there's more to it than just gender. But
do you understand why sports are separated by sex?
I do understand that, and I think that's a good thing. This is where I disagree with some trans people a bit more. I can kind of understand that. I don't think a transgender person should be able to compete competitively with biological women. I can kind of, especially if there's an unfair advantage. If there's like scientific proof and tests done that there is no advantage, then I can kind of understand.
You mean on an individual level? Like, are you saying that if you see that there's a woman who's stronger than a man, then if we can show that he has no advantage, then it's okay for them to play in the same league? Or are you talking about in general?
I'm talking more about in general. Let's say there's a transgender athlete who wants to go to the Olympics to compete with women, biological women. If there's like an entire scientific reason and people who do tests on the trans person to prove that it's fair for her to compete with the biological women, then I tend to believe that those people know what they're doing and they truly believe that it's fair. And then I'm like, yeah, sure, it's probably fair she competes. But like in general, when it comes to like not professional, where there are no tests, like in an amateuristic boxing match, I don't think, for example, a trans person should fight a biological.
I think that, like, I'm not going to get into statistics and all that because there are things that people can read when in their spare time if any of your viewers are interested. But the problem is, for example, with Caster Semenya, who's this famous South African runner, claims to be female because he was born with his testicles inside his body. So he had like male puberty. So even though they made him lower his estrogen levels to make him, as you say, weaker, smaller muscles, he had still gone through male puberty. So for those cases, I just don't think it's fair. But mainly what I hear from what you're saying is that you can imagine some exceptions here and there, but that would put you in the category of transphobe. You do know that.
Yeah, I can understand. Well, this is like a bit where I'm a bit more right-wing. Like when you are transgender and everybody in life needs to make some sacrifices, and if the sacrifice means living your life but not being able to compete in women's sports on a competitive level, I think I would pay that price. And I can kind of see those concerns.
You'd be unusual in that sense, in the fact that you would make concessions.
I do think so, because I watched a lot of trans people debate about trans women in sports who would think that they should, but I personally don't think they should. I think I can see why it would be unfair. But if there's like true science and people who are like 100% scientific and not biased towards anybody, and they decide it is fair, then I tend to believe them though.
And can I ask, have you undergone the administrative change of legal sex, or are you still male on your papers?
I'm still male on my papers. I'm in the process of it. Next month, I will have an ID card with female on.
Okay. Do you see then, let's just make the link from that action of getting an F on your ID card and then showing up in the Olympics and saying, well, I am female, look, because the problem that I have, Joyce, is not with people who like to go around dressed and present like you do. The problem that all TERFs have at the very basic foundations is sex self-ID. It's the idea that someone can choose their sex, because it's the idea of garbage in, garbage out. Once you say F here, then you have to think through all of the consequences of what that will lead to. And the consequences of that are males in amateur or professional boxing leagues punching actual real women. And I think we give this impression on Twitter, especially because we're so angry, we give this impression that we just hate all trans people. What we hate is sex self-ID, and it needs to be taken out of the law, because I think you're living your life and you're doing your thing and you're selling videos or streaming and monetized videos or whatever. And you're like, why do all these people hate me? The thing is, you can't falsify your sex because it leads to unintended and dangerous consequences for other people. So it might, and I'm not saying that because you are a dangerous person. I'm saying that it's the same reason why, and it's the same, it's like, to come back to what you said a minute ago, you said you were so afraid last year to go out of your house because the way you look and because people perceive you as a trans-identified male, they'll attack you. This is what those same people come after us. So we have the same issue. And the problem is that if the legislature allows any man to deceive others administratively on paper about their sex, that's dangerous for us. So we don't want that. And that's what we're upset about.
But to understand it correctly, you would rather not have me change my sex on my ID card, because in case I would go to a sport, I could say that I'm female and then beat up somebody.
There's one step before that. It's not that I don't want you to go to falsify your sex on your documents, which I don't. But what I don't want is, I don't want the law to allow any man to do that, because we can't tell what man is doing that for what reason. And as you may know, in Belgium especially,
this is quite complex and a lot to talk about, because it sounds to me that you're afraid of men and not afraid of trans women.
Because they're the same thing for me.
Yeah, I understand that they're the same, and that's where we kind of disagree. Basically, how to explain it a bit, my biological sex is male. I'm born a guy. I have something between my legs. My biological sex is male, but how you feel inside your head is your gender, and how you feel inside, for most people, that matches with their biological sex. Most people are male, they have a penis, but they also feel in their side that they're a guy. If that's not the case, if your gender is different from your biological sex, if you feel in your head more feminine, or you want to like wear dresses and do your makeup and stuff, or whatever is like generalized female.
I don't wear makeup or dresses. No, I am female.
No, that's maybe too generalizing, I guess. But when you feel in your head more feminine, then your gender doesn't match your biological sex. And when it doesn't, that's when you're trans. So when you're a transgender person, it's different from a guy.
So when we were talking about sports here, and you said that if definitive proof of a disadvantage, or that if scientists in a sporting competition and decide that, okay, this male-born person has no more advantage over females, you would think that that's okay for that person to fight a boxing match or run a race or whatever, because you're dependent there on evidence and science, and that's quite important.
I think those people are smarter than me, and I think those are scientists. So I think that they're smarter than me. So I would trust their judgments because those people study it for their job. So if they say this is how it is, I trust it more than my opinion or what I read online.
Yes. So that's why I brought that up, because you seem to be quite committed to evidence-based decisions. The idea that somebody has a gender in their head or in their soul that doesn't match their body is complete bullshit. Like, it's not, there's no science for it. So why are you committed to that idea? There's no evidence for it. You say you feel feminine, and I don't doubt that you do. I'd say you look at women and you say, I relate more to her than I do to him. That's no doubt. But there's nothing that makes you anything other than a male who has those feelings.
But a male who has those feelings, so you don't think gender is a thing, right? You just think there's just biological sex.
I think that there are some men are much more feminine than other men, and some women are much more butch than other men. From what we know, it has something to do with the environment in the uterus, about like why some people turn out to be same-sex attracted, others turn out to be bisexual, lesbians, gay, or even also transvestism, autogynephilia, or whatever, identifying with the opposite sex. I think that there's evidence that, especially let's take a man who is extremely femme, there's evidence that this is all affected by the uterine environment. So I, of course, understand that there are men who feel feminine. We don't have to dwell on it, but this is one of the things that we consider sort of hateful for somebody who's male to say, I know what it feels like to be a woman, and then to list things like dresses and makeup or whatever. Even to say, I know what it feels like to be a woman, how could you possibly know? You are a male, you are your body. And I just wonder how you've come to that conclusion.
Well, what I am biologically is not what I am inside my head. My genitals or the body I have doesn't present who I am. But can I ask you, where are you going with this? What's your end goal of this? Do you then want transgender people not to exist, with the ideal outcome for you to be me presenting masculine again?
No, absolutely not. Of course not. And we've said that always from the beginning. What we want is an end to sex self-ID, because it creates down the line dangerous situations for women and kids. And I think maybe I need to explain more why we've come to those conclusions. That's it. We, like, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people who are TERFs came from a lefty backgrounds. We're like, yeah, let men wear dresses. This is cool. This is more open up, because we as women are stuck with these very strict gender roles that we don't like and we want to break free from. And then we say, oh yeah, men, you do this. You look after the babies now, and you also do things with your hair, or wear moisturizer, or go dancing, or have fun. And we're breaking out of this 1950s attitude. But then we see something very strange. It's morphing into something very strange. And a lot of it seems to have to do with porn and to do with fetishism, which is, I'm not saying that's always the case, which is that some men who have a humiliation fetish. See, I spend a lot of time on FetLife, but now I don't even have to be on FetLife anymore. It's on Facebook, it's on Discord, it's everywhere. We see what's happening is men are saying, if I like female gender stereotypes, that means I'm a woman. And we were like, no, 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 that's not the conclusion. The conclusion is that you can do whatever you want and be whatever way you want, but your sex remains your sex. Because pretending look, a lot of this is a paper-based deception. When we see F written somewhere, we need to make sure that's F for real and not male, because there are certain circumstances where it's very important that we know who the men are. And you'll know this because you'll see all these political rules and policies about gender-based violence, protection of women against sexual violence, refugees, all this stuff. We can't have a situation in society where we allow men to hide what sex they really are. Not because I think you, Joyce, shouldn't be dressed like that, shouldn't have long hair, shouldn't do this sex work online. None of that. I don't care about any of that. I'm in favor. I will live your life, have a great time.
Okay.
But think is that by you going to your maison communale, to your Gemeindehaus and getting your ID changed, what we're doing is perpetuating this normalization of men being able to hide their sex. And the outcome on the very end of that is we have men in boxing rings with women, but we also have men in women's prisons. I don't know how far you are from Utrecht. I think it's in Utrecht. There's like in Tapeel prison, there's like 2 men who have said they are women in that prison, and they're beating the shit out of the women in there, and they're all double murderers and rapists.
Of course.
It's only not the thing, but that's what allowing gender self-ID leads to, and that's what we're against.
Like, you can abuse any system, right? You cannot forbid something because there are bad apples who abuse it. Those people need to be punished. And I 100% agree. The evil people and the people who abuse systems, they are not good. They need to go. But trans people are already a very, very small amount of people. And you are zooming in on the 0.0001% of them who are truly evil. And that's not right, and that's unfair to us.
You do understand why male and female toilets are separate, don't you? Not because we think all men are evil, but because we don't know which ones are.
No, not really. Because can you understand that if I go to the toilet dressed like this, and well, it happens quite a lot actually. If I have to go to a public toilet and I'm standing there, I need to choose between male and female toilet. Mm-hmm. Where do you think I should go in?
Male.
You think I should go male, like dressed like this? Do you know what's going to happen to me if I go into the male toilet dressed like that?
Do you know what would happen to women if we let any man into the women's toilets? Our children, who often we have to leave the doors open, so our toddler girls have to, we pull down the plants.
I don't think if there is somebody who wants to abuse, or if there's somebody who wants to do bad towards a woman, they will not do it in a public bathroom.
Why wouldn't you say that about your own case and going into the male bathroom? If somebody wants to abuse a trans woman, they won't do it in a public bathroom.
I think I would feel a bit unsafe. In the beginning, I actually did that. Like for my first year transitioning, my girlfriend, who is also trans, she dragged me into the women's bathroom. I said, don't be ridiculous, you have to go there. But before that, I went into the male bathroom. And I even stood at like an urinoir in a dress like this, being next to a guy. And to be fair, most people don't care. Most people didn't care me going to the men's bathroom.
They know you're a man, yeah. And they say, okay, fine.
Let's disagree there. But if I go to the women's bathroom, I still feel very, very scared and very stressed to do so.
Because you are, as far as we see it, and you don't hear this a lot, maybe because people who think this way have been silenced because we've been called transphobes and Nazis and bigots, but women don't want you there often. I'm not saying all of them. Women don't want you there often because you have to understand, as a woman, we have these spaces for a reason. And I know that in your head, you think you are one of us, and that's okay. And even if it turned out by some crazy miracle that you were one of us, let's imagine we have no way of knowing who these men are. And I'll tell you a very concrete outcome of this.
What do you think of like a bathroom for, what's it called again? A no gender bathroom?
Yeah, gender neutral bathrooms, if they're given an option. I mean, as long as women and children have a space that they can go to. I mean, there are solutions to that. But let me ask you, would you, as a self-identified trans woman, if you were faced with these 3 bathroom options, male, female, and gender neutral, which one would you pick?
Gender neutral, 100% of the time.
And do you understand that a lot of trans-identifying males don't want to do that?
That's not true. I think you have that opinion because you consume hateful content online and you see the bad people doing that. But in reality, or at least my reality, I know a lot of trans people, and most of them, they are very stressful, or they pass extremely well, and they are weaker than biological girls. So they don't form a threat at all. They're the sweetest people on the planet. But most people are very scared to do so. They would love to have like a gender neutral bathroom.
Well, that's very different from my experience because I've been interviewing a number of people for like 3 years now, men who identify as trans, and they go everything. You're the first quote unquote sissy that I've interviewed. The first guy I ever interviewed was from Antwerp. He absolutely detested his body, wanted to remove his penis as soon as possible. A real distressed guy. He was saving up all his money to go to the US. He was like, as soon as I transition, I am a woman, I'm living as a woman. I met also older transsexuals who were around in the 80s and the 90s. I've met self-proclaimed transvestites who think transitioning is crazy. And he said, why can't you just dress up as a woman and call yourself a man? These men fought with me about access to women's toilets because they're like, we are women. So I'm not just picking this up online. I'm actually propagating it online because I've met these men and I've spoken to them and I've said, what about third options? They say, no, I am a woman. And they all say the exact same thing. What do you think would happen to me if I went into a men's toilet?
I have no problem with going a little bit out of my way if it would make somebody else more comfortable. That's not really a thing.
And can I ask you, why do you find it necessary to change your documents at the commune? Is it a dysphoria thing or you're not in that?
To be fair, if I'm really honest, I don't really care that much what's on my ID. But I must admit, when I pass a border control looking like this and they look at my ID and they see a guy name and me with short hair stuff, it's really awkward and can get really humiliating. So it would be a lot more fun when I can just give my ID and say, okay, that matches.
Okay, well, I'm not speaking about you personally, but maybe like in 99.99% of the time, the border checkpoint guys know that this person is male. And they see M on the thing and they're like, okay, this is a guy who dresses up as a woman. I can understand it's uncomfortable and incongruous and it feels weird. And by the way, this was the argument that was used back in the 70s, 80s and 90s that got you the right now to self-ID. This was the argument. I don't know if much of the history of how legal gender recognition came to be in Europe, but this was the argument that they were like big, huge, you know what I'm talking about, big bricks. Like they were saying, oh, please, you need to let me change my birth certificate because otherwise I'm going to get outed every time I pass a border or every time I go to get a library card. And it was like, no, you won't. Everyone knows you're a man. But so let me just, sorry, I know you want to say something, but just in case I forget it, this idea that a small humiliation at a border check is worth rapists ending up in women's prisons, I don't think that's worth it.
It's not, but I also don't really think me changing somebody who changed, like, I don't think that somebody changing their ID card would. So let's imagine you're right and it get banned. I cannot change my ID card. Do you think it would stop those people from committing their crime? Do you think they would go like, oh, now there's an M on my ID card instead of an F, I'm not going to rape anymore?
Well, they wouldn't get into the women's prison.
Yeah, but how did they end up there? Huh? Like
because of sex self-identification.
I don't think it would stop anything from anything.
We're talking about a few specific cases here because these are the main ones. They're prisons. The intimate services like Alzheimer's, old ladies in Alzheimer's homes ask for a female carer and then they get a guy in a dress with an F on his ID card and she is given this guy. And you might say, well, we can't prevent these bad apples. And it's like, well, you can if you don't let males identify as females because some men have a fetish for this kind of thing. We have sports, we have prisons, we have intimate services, and we have also access to private spaces. So let me just give you a very real world example. And again, Joyce, I'm not saying by you going to the commune and picking up your ID card that has an F on it, it's going to end up with violent males in prisons. I'm talking about the step before that where the state allowed you to do that. So I'm not saying you're the thing that leads to that. I'm saying that the system, what we're fighting against is to get rid of the ability of males to identify as females because some males are very, very bad. And it's the exact same thinking and logic that's behind having separate facilities for males and females in the first place. There's no difference. Real world example that's sort of an unintended consequence is that companies and shops and all this stuff and restaurants are terrified now of allowing males identified as females into female spaces. So what have they done instead? They've made all the spaces gender neutral. So they used to have 2 toilets. This has happened in Belgium where I live quite a lot. And it's happening in chains in UK, Manger and all that stuff. They have this policy now on Starbucks and all where they say, we used to have male and female, but that was too upsetting and annoying because then you had fights over who's allowed into which bathroom. So now they're all gender neutral. So now women can't go in and clean out their period cup or change their toddler's nappy because there are dodgy men coming in and out. Dodgy men. Your life is about making dodgy men online happy.
I think you're very afraid of men. But don't you think there are also like evil women who could go into the women's bathroom and do something bad?
But if you're aware of the statistics, that's just not really an issue. And I mean, to be afraid of men, like if you see the Belgian federal government coming out with a women's rights plan or a federal plan for the protection of violence against women, do you say, oh, the federal government is very afraid of men? Or do you say, it's true, men's sexuality is 100% different from female sexuality, and as a result, women and girls are often subject to predation? And I can guess that you've been subject to male predation a lot.
What do you mean?
Have you been subject to female predation?
What do you mean with predation? I don't understand that English.
Let me see. How would I explain it better? You have guys coming on to you and maybe aggressively and following you and doing all that stuff. That's a thing that men do to you, I guess, because you're a twinkie guy and they're into that and they push themselves on you and it's annoying.
Yeah, it's annoying. But yeah, like...
Have women done that?
No, I can see that. But trans women are not men, and that's where we disagree.
Okay, so let's imagine that trans women aren't men. Let's just imagine that. Okay, we live in a world where I don't believe it, because I believe that you're just a very feminine guy and you want to do your thing and you're very free. I'm very happy for you. It seems like you have a nice setup there and a nice life.
Thank you.
How would I tell the difference? Now I'm going to move on to the second sort of big bucket that I want to talk about, because as far as I can see the whole issue, we have two big buckets. And in the first bucket is, first of all, it's just not true that anyone is in the wrong body. And it's the principle of it. There's a lot of people who care about this because of the principle of it and also for free speech. And then you also have the fact that it's dangerous for women, whether in sports or prisons or intimate services for old ladies with Alzheimer's, whatever. That's one thing. So that's assuming that trans is a real thing. And still on principle, not that trans is a real thing, but let's just let you have the life that you want to have in the world that you want to have. The objections might be, well, I want to be like, it's objectively not true, etc., etc. And they're very principles. I'm kind of waffling now. I'm trying to figure out what I'm saying as I'm saying it. I see a whole other side of this. And this is what we're hopefully going to talk about now. And I think this is kind of your specialty. The whole other side of this is the fact that a lot of men have a masochism fetish. Now, bear in mind, we're living in a universe right now for the next few minutes where I'm assuming that being stuck in the wrong body, being a woman stuck in a male body is a real thing. Let's forget about that group of people and let's talk about the other group of people who in the past we would have called cross-dressers, transvestites, petticoat punishment back in the 50s and 60s. That's what they were into. These are men who get a kick out of being humiliated and degraded. And they love nothing more. And they have wives and they take off their clothes and they're straight. And they eventually go as far as they can go, because I don't know how much you're aware of this, but I track these men online and they all start off saying, I'm just going to wear a pair of sexy knickers under my work suit. And then within 15 months, they've changed their name to some porn sounding name and they're going to work in fishnet tights. But what about these men who are not quote unquote trans women? They are out on the streets. They are in our toilets. They are in our prisons. Those men don't claim to be women, but they take advantage of the trans woman.
Yeah, I agree. You can call them men. Those men should not be allowed. The difference between, in my opinion, a trans woman and somebody like that is when you're transgender and you take hormones. What happened to me when I took my hormones and I started my transition, just like with my girlfriend, our libido disappeared. I have zero sex drive. Our libido gets very low and there is no sexual desire. So if you do this out of a sexual perspective, if you transition because it's a fetish, you would become extremely unhappy. It needs to be deeper than that.
Right. But how do we tell the difference between someone like you who you look quite passable, who is taking hormones, who is not horny anymore, and the guys who are on the beginning of their transition journey who are like, I'm a man, I don't care. Wife is still at home. She hasn't divorced him yet. How do we know? We don't know. And that's why I'm saying to you that even if you believe.
I can understand fear. But what you have is fear. I can understand your fear and the things you say are not good. However, please keep in mind that the amount of, like, how many let's be very realistic. how many bad interactions did you had with trans people in real life?
I come across them in Brussels quite a lot. I don't know if Brussels very well, but there's more and more of them. And I'll tell you what, you say fear, and I understand there is definitely fear there, because when you're a woman, you've been subject to sexual assault, sexual violence, voyeurism, exhibitionism, people putting cameras in toilets all your life from a young age. Women grow up with a perv detector, and some women don't grow up with a perv detector. And those women who don't grow up with a detector, they're the ones going, yeah, trans women are women. Let men into every space, wherever, because they don't know. But I know, and a lot of the TERFs that you see on Twitter who you find hateful, we've been subject to this kind of bullshit. Second of all, I wouldn't classify these men, these straight cross-dressing transvestites or whatever, as a danger in such. I'm not trying to say, and I'm not saying that these are bad apples and I shouldn't focus on them. I'm not saying they're a danger. What I'm saying is this. I spend a lot of time observing those people. And for 3 years, I have been in their groups and I have been talking to them and I have been trying to understand. And this is the conclusion that I have come to.
Okay.
The conclusion I've come to is that those men, they often start small. They get into it. They buy their stuff. They try it on. They get a hit. They have a lot of masturbation sessions. They usually keep it to the home. Then they get further and further and further out. And then they get to the point where it's a compulsion, and then they throw away all their stuff, and then they say, I'm never going to do it again. And then they end up buying it all again. Then they feel worse and blah, 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 often leading to divorce, etc., etc. What happens to them generally is that they're attracted to women principally, but once they're in the sissy zone, once they're in the zone of, okay, I'm a woman now, the whole trip is, and it's really insulting to us, to be degraded, humiliated, weak, submissive, etc., because that's what you men, and I include you in this, seem to think. You can respond to that in 2 seconds when I'm finished. You seem to think that what a woman is the submissive person who is kind of worthless and weak and not worthless. And I've said this to so many people who identify as trans before, and they say, no, we worship women, we love women, no. But what you see us as is pink and frilly and makeup, and it's very dehumanizing. So these men, okay, the answer, when I'm finished, please take all the time to answer, but just let me finish this bit about these cross-dressing transvestites. So I see these men and I see the things that they post and I see what they're into, and it's very much degrade me, use me, I'm a piece of shit. And they're often like big fancy jobs guys, CEOs, and people who have quite powerful positions. There's everything. You have bricklayers, you have doctors, you have everything. But what happens is when they go outside into the street, the thing that gets them going and the thing that they like the most is being perceived by others as female and weak and submissive and girly and cute and because this is what they like. However,
Can I start?
okay, I'm not finished, but go ahead, interrupt.
Yeah,
because otherwise it'll go on too long. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, otherwise I forget what you're saying in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think there are many dominant trans people as well, by the way. It doesn't all have to be. But about the fetish part, for example, I'll talk about me first. Because for me, it started as something I expressed sexually. But it was a lot deeper than that. But because of my surroundings and the society, I was very ashamed to be trans. So the only way for me to express those feelings that I had inside me was between four walls with myself and dressing up and stuff. But eventually that feeling gets too strong and eventually you can transition. For some people, things are just sexually, and that's completely fine as well. In my opinion, as long as you don't do anybody harm, as long as you don't hurt anybody, you can do whatever you want, basically. And don't break any laws, of course. So I don't judge people who dress up as a woman if it's just a sexual thing either, because I don't see the harm in that. But I love the freedom of expression, and I'm of the opinion, do whatever you want as long as you don't break any laws and you don't hurt anybody. I think you should be free. There are a lot of trans people or people who are trans. They start with expressing themselves in a more between four walls, because that's where they feel safe, and eventually they discover it's more deeper than that, and it's a self thing instead of a sexual thing. That can happen sometimes.
When you say it's deeper than that, what were the kind of indications that you had that suggested to you, oh, this isn't just sexual thing? Because I suspect, because I see a lot of these stories from men, they say it started off sexually and then I just got really comfortable as my alter ego, Susie or whatever. And then, but sometimes I think, and I spoke to a transvestite about this recently, and he said to me, it made me realize that what he told me made me realize that. So he was one of these people who kept up just the sexual thing and never progressed to anything else. He never went on to say, I'm a trans woman.
It's possible that for some people it's just a sexual thing, and that's completely fine as well, as long as they don't bother anybody else.
It led me to the conclusion that the only real difference is what you tell yourself about it. Because that man could have taken the next step and said, no, I'm not just horny. This is who I am. And then he would feel better about it. And he said to me, men who have these cross-dressing fetishes, they want to go to the doctor. They want someone to say to them, you've got gender dysphoria. And this validates what you have. And no, you're not just a pervert. You're actually somebody who has a condition. And this makes them feel better. So I'm wondering, and this is a bit sensitive because we're talking about your life personally, but I'm wondering, did you at some point, like this sexual drive that you had because of this, did you say to yourself, well, I don't want to just go around being like calling myself some sort of fetishistic cross-dresser. I must really be a woman. Was that a way to justify to yourself what you were doing was something more noble?
Not really. I wouldn't say noble. I just I expressed it. Well, I grew up in a very big family with a lot of brothers and sisters, and I'm oldest one. So I was always an example of them, and they all looked up to me. I don't have a father anymore, so they all looked up to me as an example figure. I couldn't transition because I couldn't do that to them because they needed me to look up to them. So these feelings inside me, I just expressed them between four walls and kept it
like hidden. Yeah.
Yeah. But eventually those feelings became more frequent and I started to talk about them more. And eventually I made the decision to transition because that's how I feel inside.
But again, what was it that told you it was something deeper? Like, was it something like you felt when you took off your girl clothes that you felt less like yourself, or what did
I don't get sexually aroused from being a woman or being a girl. I don't get sexually aroused by that at all. I can get sexually aroused just like anybody else, but the act itself is not something sexual.
Was there a time in your early transition when it was sexually exciting to go outside dressed as a woman?
No, it was always something extremely scary for me to do. Like, for example, going outside with long hair and a dress, like that only happened a half year ago. And I was like shaking and scared. And I hoped I didn't bother anybody. And I hope nobody would think I'm weird. And I was really scared to do this. So it's never really been like being girls doesn't feel sexual.
And to what extent, when you also were trying out all these clothes and stuff earlier on, was it exciting for you to like share the images of yourself?
Yeah, that was kind of exciting. And I also wondered about why I did that. Why did I share? Because back then I wasn't out as a trans person yet. But I was sharing pictures of myself dressed up completely on the internet. And I was thinking, why did I do that? And I think secretly, I wanted it to come out so that I can finally just go and be myself. Like it was my way to out, I guess. I don't know.
Because this is really, really common. It's the exhibitionist aspect of it that I see the most. Because from what I can see from the men who do this on all of the different groups that I'm in, it's the perception of others that's very central to experience. And so this is especially true of these guys I'm talking about who, there's a famous joke in the old transsexual community. I don't know if it's translated into the new generation of trans identifying men or not, but it's what's the difference between a transvestite and a transsexual, as in a transvestite who's just a crossdresser and then a person who goes for the operation, etc. And the answer is 11 months.
No. One is a sexual fetish and the other one is who you are.
Right. And how would I know if I see a man in a dress in my bathroom, which one is there because he's doing an exhibitionist public fetish display and who's not?
How many men in a dress in a bathroom have you seen?
A few, but I'm talking about prevention here because I see this. What we're doing here, it's like building a car and then saying we better put seatbelts in it because I think there's going to be accidents. And then the engineer going, how many accidents have you seen? And it's like, well, we haven't driven it yet. I'm here to say this is an unsafe practice because I know, because I've been on the earth as a woman for 40 years.
Should people be punished for the actions of men in dresses?
Well, you're all men in dresses technically, and we don't know. That was the first part of the conversation. If you would like to hear the rest, you can go to peaked.substack.com to hear more. You do that by taking out a paid subscription, which helps me to continue this work and to quit my day job so I can do more of it. Thank you very much. peaked.substack.com.